Thank you so much, Ngoni. That was beautiful. I'm very pleased to welcome our next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Sellah because we worked together on the Nairobi Peace Talks a few years ago. Dr. Sellah is the Assistant Director of Research, Policy and Planning at Kenya's National Cohesion and Integration Commission, the NCIC. She's a researcher by training, and through her work, she shows the importance of how research translates into real life, and she seeks to measure peace, ethnic relations, genocide prevention, and social cohesion, among other things. Welcome, Dr. Sellah.
Thank you very much. I'm very delighted to be here. I would also like to start by taking you back. I was 11 years old. My grandmother called me in one evening and said, "Here, put this on." She gave me my grandfather's jacket and socks. And at that time, usually she would tell me stories. So I asked so many questions. She said, "Well, just follow me and hurry up." So I followed her, trying to match her steps. But of course, I wouldn't catch up because my strides were very short and the jacket was also very heavy. So we arrived at the cave near the river, and she told me, "Go to the back where the children are and make sure no one makes a sound." Silence was our only protection. The cave would be our abode for a couple of weeks until the violence between the two neighboring communities would cease. Now, even without understanding the nature of the conflict, I wondered, how can adults not just sit down and resolve their disputes? Why wouldn't some of them just let go like I did at school when one of my colleagues would snatch a mango from me? Instead, they decided to torch each other's houses. They decided to injure each other. And that lingered on my mind. Now, some of you may be wondering, how can Africa lead for peace if these are the scenarios that you hear about Africa? Well, things have changed, and I'm really, really delighted to share this story today. Africa is increasingly adopting homegrown solutions to address conflicts. The 2007-2008 post-election violence hit Kenya by surprise. Even some of us who were working in the peace sector were actually taken aback. However, its response was calculated and indigenous. Kenya was described as a haven of peace in a sea of turmoil, with its neighbors like Sudan having experienced over 20 years civil war, Somalia that didn't even have a government. However, the post-election violence was a bit different from the community conflicts I earlier described. It spread across the country. We woke up to neighbors attacking each other in broad daylight under the glare of both national and international media. In a span of only 6 weeks, 1,500 people had lost their lives, and over 600,000 had been displaced. The African Union put together a team of eminent persons, led by the Honorable Kofi Annan, to come and mediate between the two political parties. Now, this mediation process was highly participatory. Some would think perhaps the team would have talked only to the political parties, but on the sidelines, we had meetings of concerned citizens, meetings that brought together NGOs, religious leaders, elders, among others. And I was privileged to be part of this team. One of the times I made a submission to the team of eminent persons, and we were emphasizing the fact that despite the fact that the immediate issue was power sharing, we needed to look at the underlying issues of the violence. I'm really glad to say that the mediation process gave birth to local institutions that would later address root causes of post-election violence. Now, one of the institutions that was born was the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, where I was privileged to work thereafter. Today, we actually enjoy a new constitution in Kenya. We have wider civic space. We do have sensitive, we are really sensitive to inequalities, thanks to these homegrown solutions. As it was shared, I'm also a researcher. And the other thing that Africa is doing currently to actually stay on the cutting edge is it's embracing research. It is putting in place more evidence-based interventions, especially in the field of peace building. I will share my story in this regard. Charon et al., Charon and some few authors, in 2018 mentioned that between 2012 and 2016, the number of authors writing about Africa and from Africa grew at the rate of 43%. That is to say, there are more people who are doing research on African matters. Now, we also are doing a lot of research around peace building in Kenya. And one of the things we appreciate after post-election violence is that minority rights play a key role, particularly in resolving identity-based conflicts. So in the year 2010, I led a team to undertake the first ever ethnic audit of the public service, which aimed at looking at the composition of all public employees in Kenya, so that we can know which ethnic communities have been employed by government and which ones have not. There were various findings, but today I will share only one, and that is the ethnic communities that were totally lacking in government employment. There were about 8 of them. Kenya has over 42 ethnic groups, and out of these, 8 of them did not have even a single member employed in the entire government service. And we started lobbying for affirmative action for these 8 communities. Some of the actions that we did was to take adverts to the regions where the minority communities were based, to do personal referrals if someone knew a member of a minority ethnic group that would fit in a certain job, to set aside positions in specific government agencies for minority communities, among others. Now, I will share a story of one Letangule who is from the Ilchamus community. He was employed by one of the public universities in Kenya in the year 2014. Not only did he get a job as a janitor, but he also was offered free tuition for one of his siblings. He can now pay school fees for his children as well as his siblings. And this is what Letangula had to say. He said, "This job will help my daughter to also join university employment in future, but not as a janitor like me, as a professor." The research findings have actually been incorporated in the State of the Nation address that the president gives every year, to look at which communities are still left out in terms of public service and which ones have been incorporated. In conclusion, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere from Tanzania said that if real development has to take place, the people have to be involved. And I dare say they have to be included. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sellah.